Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Creating Confident Communication. And today we have an amazing guest, and this is Hayden Gurman. Hayden Gurman grew up in Florida. He is the oldest son of 4 boys. He married his childhood crush, Lisa. They've done a lot together, including graduating from BYU, moving over 15 times, and welcoming 5 children. Hayden Gurman spent 12 years doing sales. He always felt there was something more for him to do. In 2019, he left a lucrative job in Indianapolis and moved to Farmington, Utah to be a seminary teacher at Viewmont High School in Bountiful, Utah. He will be going into his 5th year teaching, and he has truly never been happier. He loves his job, but most of all, he loves his students. Hayden enjoys working out, playing disc golf, spending time with his kids, and going on dates with his hot wife. 9 months ago, Hayden had an accident while out on a run. The accident almost ended his life, and it's echoed by many doctors and specialists. He should not have survived. These past months since the accident have been extremely difficult for Hayden and his family, but he has learned a lot, and he is excited to share some of this experience with all of you. Hayden, we're so grateful. Not only am I thrilled because the community knows you, but my family personally, and my son, we consider you just a wonderful friend. So thank you for taking time today to share with us a little bit about the journey and what you've been doing. Would you be willing to just start and tell us a little bit about what happened?
Yeah, I'm excited to be here too. Thank you. It was September 24th of last year. I was out for a run. It was my first day of training for a marathon, and went for a run. I don't remember anything after that. I woke up and I was in the hospital. They think that I was running and crossed the street, and I thought there was a sidewalk on the other side of a guardrail, and I jumped over the guardrail thinking there was a sidewalk, and there wasn't, and I fell 40 feet on my back and injured myself really bad. When I was in the hospital, I had a lot of injuries. I fractured 8 or 9 vertebrae. My pelvis fell apart at the joints, so I broke my pelvis, fractured both of my scapulas, broke a bunch of ribs, and then I lacerated a lot of organs inside. So I was pretty badly messed up.
Wow. So. And when I saw you today on camera, I'm like, look how good you look. And what did you tell me? You said this was the part that didn't get damaged.
Yeah, this right here. This is
that looks amazing. Well, your whole face was protected. So tell us a little bit about how that healing process went. What was the recovery?
It was the hardest thing I've ever experienced. Being independent and being able to do anything and everything. I was in the best shape of my life before I fell. So the healing process was very long. They thought I was going to be in the hospital for 3 months, but I slowly started really getting better quickly, and I stayed in their hospital for 33 days. I couldn't walk because they put screws on my hips, so I couldn't walk for 6 weeks. So I was in the wheelchair, and then eventually a walker, and then I started slowly walking and using a cane. So the process of healing, I'm still in the process of healing. It's I also had a stroke, which affected my left leg, and so it doesn't work the same way as it just did before, and there's still pain I have to kind of deal with. So every day is a different experience. So I have good days and bad days.
So can you lift your leg now, or is it you've got full movement or not?
I don't have full movement. The stroke affected the nerves, so the ability for the foot to work normally and walk and push forward, it doesn't do that. So it made it really hard for any type of like walking or running. But they think it'll come back hopefully in a year or two. That's how long it typically takes to heal from a nerve pain, nerve injury.
Wow. So right now you're 9 months out. And you look great. I know that personally you have inspired so many. It was so funny. I got permission to share this from my son, but he came home and he's like, Mom, I've got like the coolest seminary teacher. He's the only reason I want to go. He's like so fit. And if me and a few buddies, like we get to go work out with him, and he just pushes us, and he had so much respect for you and your physical strength. But I'm curious, you know, and I apologize if I get emotional because I feel such a connection to you, but you know, what did it take for you mentally to try to work through some of this?
It was really hard. Just you know, to go from being so independent to not being able to walk, and had to be so dependent on so many people and so many healthcare professionals, that it was a extremely humbling experience. I maybe I already said it, but it was the hardest and lowest point of my whole life. And just when I was like in that situation, you know, it really kind of wears on me, and it's a day-to-day thing to you know, think, I don't want to be in this situation, or this really stinks that I can't run, or I can't walk, or I can't do these things. But I'm so fortunate where I am right now, and the healing process has taken place. But it's been really hard.
Oh, I bet. So every day it's like a challenge to, you know, choose joy. I mean, that's one thing in this podcast, creating confident communication, is people that are willing to speak and share about the hardest things they've ever endured in their life. And now they're on this side where they want to share to help other people. They want to, you know, we've had some that have lost their legs and their limbs and their families to death. And realizing that, from what I've heard from different people and even from myself, sometimes the hardest things we've gone through can be the greatest blessings and gifts if we're willing to share with other people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I found that, you know, you and your wife, I'm curious, you know, when did you start to feel confident or start to want to have a desire to share this with the community? And I know you were on the news, and your wife has a really big following with what she shared with the journey. When did you guys come to a space that you wanted to share what was going on in your life?
My wife, it happened very quickly after the first, you know, week or two of me being in a hospital. It was more for her to share with others and our friends and family, like, what was going on. But I didn't really, you know, when I woke up, it was a hard and like shocking reality, right? And I didn't feel like I wanted to share. I didn't want my kids to come in, and I just wanted to stay in my room. And I just remember thinking, like, why am I hiding this? Like, what benefit would it do for me to just keep this to myself? And if I share this, how many people could just potentially benefit from it? So I didn't know what the benefit, you know, what the future was, specifically because, you know, I had really bad brain damage. They didn't even know if I was going to come back, and the stroke and all these, you know, things that I had to heal from. So, you know, I talked to my wife, and I was like, hey, I need you to post these things, because I can't do it for one thing. But for another thing is I just want my students to see that they can overcome something really, really hard. So that's when, it was probably a week or two after my injury, I just started having her taking pictures and videos, and not just like the good videos or pictures, but the ones that were really hard for me. And there was some videos I have where I was in a lot of pain, but I think that being vulnerable and being open to people and sharing this message could potentially help, even if it's just my kids, but my students to see that you can get through something really, really hard.
I absolutely love that. And your message has been able to reach so many. And I'm sure watching Dad heal and share has probably been a gift to your kids. How have your kids responded to all of this?
Really good, actually. They came to see me in the hospital, and I was very nervous about them seeing, because you want to be a strong dad and a put together, and I was the lightest I've ever been. I was 155 pounds. When I fell, I was 195 pounds. So I was very weak, and I couldn't get up. I could barely move my left side. So it was really hard for me to do anything. So for them to see that, it was a humbling and but a good experience, because they really stepped up and showed me they didn't care about that. They just cared about being around me. And the more people came and visited me, it really showed me that like unconditional love that they had for me and that I have for them.
No, I love that, because I bet the people that came to see you were probably so blessed and honored to watch your strength. I believe in, and especially with now doing these interviews, every one of us are dealing with a struggle. Every one of us are dealing with a problem. And for some, it's physical, it's mental, it's our personal lives, it's our family life. But it's almost, when I was watching some of your videos, I felt strong. I felt like, oh my gosh, we could do this. So tell us a little bit more about like some of the goals that you had, because I remembered you saying you were training for a marathon that first day. That was your first day out there, huh?
Yeah, first day out. And first thing, I don't like running, but I was with my best friend, and I was like, I want to do something hard. And he's like, hey, just run a marathon with me. I was like, okay, but I want to do something harder. So the next day I went for a run. And then, yeah, this is the hardest thing I've ever did. But yeah.
How many feet did you say you fell? So
I fell 40 feet.
40. Wow.
Which the doctor said that's pretty much the limit. Of falling. Like when humans hit the just the impact, will really, really affect just the chances of survival are very, very slim. So, but yeah, I was it's a funny story. It's a crazy story, and I think about it to this day. I was in the hospital, and it was a time where I was in a really dark place, thinking like, why did this happen to me? I don't remember anything. So like, why would I do that? I'm a happy person. I have nothing, like, I wouldn't jump off a bridge knowing I don't really like heights too much. So, but anyways, I was sitting there and I was thinking about all the things I couldn't do. And I started thinking about the goal I had to run a marathon. And then I just was like, well, what if I could do it? And this idea of like, what if started happening. And this sounds crazy and it's hard for me to say it, but like, I just closed my eyes and I had this like vision, and it was like such a strong, it was one of the strongest visions I've ever had. Like sometimes you like daydream, but this was like, I saw myself finishing a marathon. I felt it. I was excited. I felt the joy, the pain, like all of these things. And it was that vision that I was like, I can do this. I bet I can do this. And I'll never forget this. The doctor came in right after, and he's like, how are you doing? And I was like, hey, do you think I could run a marathon? And he was like, oh yeah, probably like, a few years when you get better. And I'm like, no, like in like 5 months or 8 months. And he's like, no, you won't be able to do it. And I was like, gosh. And I kept asking doctors, and they kept saying no, but it was just so real for me. So I saw it in my mind. And that then it was all right. I've saw myself do it. I just have to make it happen. So it was a lot of goals and little tiny goals to get to big goals. And I got to the point where I was kind of hobbling or running, and eventually I got to running and a little running faster. And I finished the marathon, and it was Ogden Marathon, and May 20th, which was like 8 or 9 months from my fall. And yeah, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done.
Honestly, when you say that, it just chills head to toe. I know you inspired so many. Did a lot of people run this with you and support you?
I had a lot of friends that were with me in the hospital and supportive. And I told them in January, I was like, hey, I think I'm going to do this. I was out of the hospital. I was back to teaching, and they're like, you are an idiot. please don't do that. And I talked to my doctors, and I just started training, and just to see how far I could go, because it was the idea of like, what if? So what if? Because if I can't do it, it's like, all right, I tried, but the idea of what if really stuck in my head. So eventually they saw I was for real, saw that I was training, saw like the minutes and times that I would do, and they were like, all right, we want to do this with you. So it was a great support for me.
Well, tell me this part, because when you were doing it, you talked a little bit about it, but when did you feel the most discouraged? When was the struggle? Because that's like, it's one thing to have an idea and see yourself and say it, but then another to like actually do it, So when did you feel that struggle or discouragement? I mean, was it, tell us a little bit about that.
I could honestly say it was a daily, or at least a weekly thing for me. It was so hard. Being in the hospital was a different type of hard. But for me, I've been very active. I was always fast, and I could just like go and run, but this was me running was hard for me. I just felt like at the beginning, I felt like it was in quicksand. I felt like it was running underwater. And my mind is like, okay, you can do this. And then I go to do it, and I couldn't. So a daily struggle where I would have to like say, okay, you're struggling right now. Step back for a second. What's the main goal? Why are you doing this? And I had the reasons in my head, and I would continue to remind myself like, hey, this is why you're doing this, and you've seen yourself do it already.
What were they? What were those reasons? What, just you'd seen it?
Yeah, I saw it first. And the second was like, I just didn't want to be my injury. Does that make sense? It's like, I didn't want to be the person that accidentally fell off a bridge and survived. I wanted to be something more than that. So, and again, I didn't like running, but I felt like this was a great opportunity for me to just forget myself and go to work and work on something that felt like impossible.
Well, it's amazing. And I've shared this a little bit, but I don't even know if you know my story. With me gaining and losing 80 pounds 5 different times, I remember the day I went to my husband and I got the idea. So I'm like relating with you on a deeper level than because I could see myself like running a marathon. And I got this idea. I was so excited. I just had Hayden, and I was miserable, and I gained 80 pounds. I was well over 200 pounds, and I'm super short. And I just had felt so sick. And I had this idea come to me about a marathon. It was like you're saying, it was like, oh, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to run a marathon. And I went to my husband all pumped up and excited and believing in myself. And he's like, whoa, honey. And he left with all good, listen, you just had a baby. you gain weight, and he was just like, I just don't think this is a good idea. And I remember, I just don't think you can do it right now. And I remember thinking to myself, like you said with the doctors, but wait, I know I can. And I remember that next day I got out there, and I don't know if you felt the same way as me, Hayden, but it was like that first day. And for me, I can't even imagine what you were going through, because your body had been broken and healing and pain. And you said your hips and your pelvis, right? Everything. I mean, for me, I just had a lot of weight on me. I had 80 pounds more weight on me. But I didn't have pain. Besides, I just had a baby and I was getting through that. But I remember jogging like 3 or 4 houses, and everything came back to me, just this flood of like, you can't do this. You're worthless. You can't. And did you ever have those like dark words and voices? Because I almost wanted to give up myself.
Yeah. And there was many, many times of me feeling like I wanted to give up. Like just the pain alone, I would say. And when I fell, I had nerve damage, and nerve damage, when it's healing, hurts really, really bad. And it feels like someone's like stabbing your foot like repeatedly with like a ice pick. That's what it felt like.
Oh.
And it like got better to where I could like manage it, right? But I knew in my mind, like, okay, if I start running, it's going to get worse. And it did really bad, to the point where my students felt like I had Tourette's, because I was always like in pain. But I just knew like I just called the demons. Like, the demons are bad today. And I would tell my wife, and she would say, okay. And she would help me. It's really hard when you're in your mind, and your mind is telling you one thing and your heart is telling you something else. So it was, what do I had to listen to that day? But yeah,
how did you work through that? For those out there that are dealing with this, with what I felt, what you felt, how did you work through it? Just day by day, or thought by thought?
It was day by day, thought by thought, minute by minute, sometimes second by second. Once I got out running and I was training, it was sometimes easier. And then sometimes I would be like, okay, I can't do this. I can't run. I'm not getting any better. Progress was really, really slow at the beginning, actually, for the most part. So yeah, for me, it was, I had to have a purpose. Once I had a purpose, and I had that purpose, and I knew this is what I'm going to do, and this is the reason why, anytime a demon or a bad thought would come in my brain, I would just go, nope. Like I have this, I'm going to focus just on this. And that helped me the most.
Well, I agree. And I remember in that moment, I just thought to myself, no, I can do this. Like I remembered kind of what you're saying. I'm really glad you shared this, because I felt like I knew I could. Something inside me was like, you can do this. And so I remember going 3 houses, and then 5, and a block, and my first 5 miles and my first 10 miles. And I asked people to do the marathon with me, which is amazing. You had some support, because no one wanted to do this thing. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, I can chicken out, I can stop, and I still to this day remember my husband's, I said, I'm going to do this. Will you be there? And he's like, well, of course I'll be there. And he was standing on the other side of the St. George Marathon, holding my baby. It'd been almost a year to the time that he was born, trained all that time. And I just remember like sobbing when I crossed that marathon, because I thought to myself, you did it. You did it. And I would love to hear what experience and what happened in your mind when you were running that race, and how that felt. Walk us through that a little bit, because there's just nothing like it. I can relate.
It was it was nothing like it. And honestly, the 3 weeks before, I was just so defeated, and just felt like I wasn't going to be able to do it. And I found out some things about the race that would make it even harder for me. And I just got in my head, and my wife was such an amazing person that really supported me and walked me through a lot. But then we got to the day before,
Wait, did you do it with your wife?
Yeah, she ran it with me.
Oh my gosh. I love her even more. How amazing.
Yeah, and she could have probably done it in like 4 hours, and I did it in 6 hours and 44 minutes. So it was
There's,
terrible. But I will never forget this feeling, because the day of the race, I was just on cloud nine. I was so happy. A part of it was because I didn't have to train anymore. But I think the biggest thing, because we were sitting on the bus going up to the canyon, and I was just like, we did it. Like, I did it. I don't like, whether we have success or not. I think the key thing is that, like, for me, the quote that keeps popping in my brain is, don't let perfection be the enemy of good. And there were lots of days where I was not perfect. And instead of running 9 miles, I ran 6, and I had to go home because I was in pain. But all these things like just built up. And if I didn't finish the marathon, I was okay, because of all the time and the discipline it took for me to get to that point. That was for me, the race for me. Because that's the hardest part. And then the marathon's fun. The first part was fun. But it was, for me, it was, if I don't do it, it's okay, because what if is still gives me the out, right? But yeah, that really helped me to look at it from that perspective.
well, and I love that you keep bringing that up because, there's a lot of times in our life, and I think that's something we could share with people. It's something I use all the time is, like these doctors, well, maybe you can't, right? But that thought and that question that we can constantly ask ourselves, but what if we could? What if we can? What if we can start? And that's the question that's always helped me. I mean, I think that's what's helped me in my journey. And I believe, because I did the half marathon for the one you did, and that was tough. So that full marathon, it's a good marathon. It's a tough one. I know some of the videos that were shown at at the end, where I don't know if it was at the end. I'd love you to share where you were, crying, like really emotional. It looked like you were in a lot of pain. Tell me a little bit about that, if you would.
Well, yeah, the pain, like the first half of the marathon was really, I was a good pace, and I was doing really well. And then the half marathon, they give you like some stuff. So I took a gel, and I never did the gel before. And that's what made me super sick. So
Oh,
like every mile I was dry heaving and throwing up, and
oh,
I was ramping up. So there was a lot of pain in my like hips, but in my legs, didn't have the strength to be able to go 6.5 hours. So I was in a lot of pain. That was almost as much as in the hospital, but it was a extremely hard. So yeah,
at
hopefully.
some point, did you just want to stop? Did you just want to quit?
um I told my friends, I was like, hey, just so you know, you're gonna have to drag me away from not finishing this race, because I've already seen myself do it. So I'm going to do it. So I need you to support me this way. So they were good. And there were a few times where they like came up and you're like, hey, you know what? You don't have to run this. Like, you just take a break. And I'm like, nope, let's do this. So I just, it was because I saw it in my head. But yeah, there was one moment I had really bad heat exhaustion. I almost passed out. The medic was really concerned with me, but they got some water on me, and I shook it off. So I knew I was going to finish. It was just a matter of how long it would take for me to finish.
I always had that motto, and I don't know about you, but it was like slow and steady wins the race. I just wanted to prove to myself and to my brain that I could do it, that I could dream to do something that would be that challenging, and being overweight and having those issues, and actually do it. And I think what I'm hearing you say today is, if for people out there, is if you can believe it or see it in yourself, then you can be that. You can become that. It's
Yeah.
almost like that mental strength and believing and seeing it, even if it doesn't even feel really true. If you can see it in your mind and visualize it, this is what I've learned, that you've got that to hang on to, because it was almost like, no, I've seen me doing this and I'm going to do it. Right. What's that?
Yeah, I was gonna say like visualization was a key thing for me, and there were lots and lots of times where I would just close my eyes and remember those feelings, remember those thoughts, and really see myself doing it. Because once I saw it, it was so real to me that I couldn't help to not believe it.
You're so inspiring. I mean, to know, I was kind of mentioning to you briefly, my husband fell and hurt his ribs and didn't even break them. And they were saying that with pulled muscles and strained, and you were going through the nerves, I mean, it can take up to 8 weeks just to feel better. And I started doing this in my mind because I'm like, whoa, okay. So how long did it take Hayden to do this once he got out of the hospital? You were still healing, right? You were
Yeah,
still working through that and
yeah.
training for a marathon, because you
No,
said you broke your ribs and you were but I guess the main thing I want to share, first of all, is just, I know that you're inspiring to me and so many others. And I think if I were to ask you kind of this last question, I feel like this is the big one. There are people right now that are really struggling, and we all have our different thing, but if there was one thing that you could say to someone that maybe is in the darkest space that you ever were, maybe is really, really struggling to get out of their room, to let people in, but maybe they feel a call to want something more. I mean, what would you say to the one who's trying to find a way to have a different result?
I think for me, it was in the past, it was really easy for me to let people's opinion affect me. It was really easy for me to think, oh, I'm going to try to do this, and then be afraid of like, oh, what if I don't succeed? Or what if I don't, or let people down? Or like all these what ifs of like me not doing something. Um, but there's a quote, and it's don't ask if your dreams are crazy, ask them if you're crazy enough. And I loved that, because I remember telling all my friends that I was going to do it, and they just it was like the opposite of what I thought they were going to be. So for the advice I would tell that one person is don't worry about what anyone else says. Just focus on you, and focus on something that will make you better. And if this will make you better, it's going to be hard. And this was the hardest thing I've ever done, experienced. And I'm good to not do some hard things for a little while. But experiencing this helps me to know that I can accomplish anything that I put my mind to. And if my mind thinks I can do this one thing, it's going to be hard. And if I break it down in steps to make it more digestible, I can achieve it.
Oh, and you know what? I love that. I joked with my kids that I passed on the disease to please others.
Oh,
And I said, you don't have to have this disease, because the truth is, it doesn't matter what people think or what people say. It didn't matter that every doctor in there didn't have faith that you could do this,
yeah.
because you believed in yourself. I love that quote that you said. I kind of like the one that she believed she could, and she did. And I
Yeah.
had that one on my wall, because it was like, if we believe that we can do it, we can. And, the interesting thing, like you said, I know yours was pretty recent. Mine was years ago. My son's now 19. And I remember looking at my husband. I'd had a few more miscarriages and another baby. And I remember looking at him saying, hey, I gained back another 80 something pounds. And I said, hey, I'm going to run a marathon. And he looked at me this time, and he didn't look at me and say, oh, you can't do it. He said, I know you will. And I remember thinking, I know I will, because when we believe in that and we know and we've proven to ourselves, there's nothing that we can't do. And I think along with you and I and anyone else, we may have hard things that come up. And at this time in our lives, that may have felt like the hardest thing, but it might be the thing that helps us do the next. And any trial that shows up, we can look at, if we choose to, as a gift to make us stronger. And I just love what you shared about try something that's almost like what I heard you say, and tell me if this is right. Something maybe a little scary. If you don't want to leave the house, try to go outside. If you don't want to look someone in the eyes or communicate, just don't run from what feels scary. And because it's easy to do that. It's easy to just get out, just go towards what you want, because then you're becoming what you're, and it might feel scary, but there's something, and tell me if this feels right. For me, as you're moving towards what you really, really want, that goal that maybe seems so scary, the closer and the things you do that scare you the most bring you closer to that.
Oh, absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was such a rush for me to for people to not believe in me after a while. It kind of hurt at first, but then I was like, I'm gonna prove, watch me do this. And there were days that I had hard days, and there were days like my wife wouldn't even want to run. I'm like, no, we're doing this. And it caused pain. And there was another quote that I really stuck out to me that I thought about a lot with me going through the pain, right? But the quote is, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. And there's lots of times where I just would remember the meaning, and it helped me through all the hard times. Because if you're going to try something impossible, or what other people say is possible, it probably means it's going to be really difficult and hard. But if you're okay to know, it's going to be hard, it has meaning. It's not suffering anymore. It's okay. I signed up for this. I want to achieve this. And if I try to achieve this and I get to here, it's a lot better than not even trying.
Exactly. And look what you were able to do. I don't think anyone even cared how long that took you. No one probably even asked you the time. The fact that you did it, I think, is more inspiring than you realize. I'm just so grateful. And I guess I just want to say that I'm truly honored to have you share your story. We want this to touch as many of Davis County as we can, because so many people know you, and I think it's okay to say that all the athletes and all the cool kids always wanted you as their seminary teacher, because you were relatable and you were fun and you're strong and all these qualities. And then being able to do this after literally, if you could say it this way, being completely broken, right? Some of us are just broken inside and feel emotionally broken, but you were literally broken.
Literally and figuratively. It's the lowest point I've ever experienced. And yeah, that's why I wanted my students to see it. It was like, you can come back, and I'm not back, but I'm starting the process, and anyone can do it. If I can do it, anyone can do it.
I love that. And that's what I feel too. If we can do this, then you can. And today, as we close this podcast, we're creating confident communication, just one person at a time. If there's one person out there that we can help and inspire, one person that you can help and inspire daily, just do something that gets a little bit scary. Just do it, because there's always somebody that can learn and grow from the trial that you're going through. I really believe that. And I don't know what you feel, but sometimes when I've experienced, really, really hard things, I often run into someone who's going through something similar, and I'm able to help them with that.
Absolutely.
So we just want to thank you again, Hayden, for being here with us. And like I said, we're just excited to share this. And And I'm sure all your seminary kids are going to love it. So thank you so much. And to your wife, Lisa, and just the incredible message that you're sharing here. And we just want to leave you today and tell you that if we can do this, then you can do this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.